how has this come about?
Yeah.
Why is it that one act, as it were, brought the pillars of the temple tumbling down? And I think my answer would be that the structure was already fundamentally rotten. Both political parties, first Blair with Labour, New Labour, and then the Conservatives under Cameron, were completely hollowed out structures with minuscule memberships in which they had been taken over by a particular faction. And it was a particular faction espousing a set of universal neoliberal values. Yeah. And of course, Cameron and Clegg saw Blair as the master politician. I don't know whether you realise this. That Blair's book was passed around as gospel.
The heir to Blair.
As Blair. Blair was referred to as the master. And it's also very important to understand just how deliberately destructive New Labour was. I mean, fashionable people like Linda Collins, demolition of the notion of Britishness, that bizarre account by a historian of Poland of the British Isles, called, and so on, were held up within the civil service as required reading. So you had a deliberate demolition of the notion of nationhood, what we know about, as it were, rubbing people's noses in it, either with open-ended immigration on the one hand, or within the Tory party, the enforcement of gay marriage on the other. These were all deliberate elite devices to say, we're in command. You lot don't matter. You will do as you were told, and you will shut up.
Yes, yes.
And I think that what Brexit has done has torn the veil from people's faces. In other words, I think there were absolutely fundamental changes there before, which we sort of didn't really notice.
I mean, do you think? How would therefore you characterise? I mean, I know that you, as an historian, I know you don't like maybe looking at the future and saying, "Oh, this will happen, that will happen," but
I don't at all.
No, but this, therefore, is an extraordinary time of our history.
It is. I think it's the moment at which two things have happened. I think the Constitution, as it emerged from the Glorious Revolution, is manifestly finished. It stopped working. Right. You could argue equally that notion of constitutional development from Magna Carta itself has also come to an end.
Really?
I mean, you've got to ask the question, how is it that broadly we've avoided revolution? Why have we avoided revolution? Because in England, and we really should talk about it, the English Parliament that's just got a few bells and whistles stuck onto it. In England, the position of those wanting a place in the sun, wanting admission to the political elite, first the entrepreneur and the rich outside the charm circle of the aristocracy and the gentry, then the skilled worker, then women, and the whole thing. Every one of them didn't want to do what was the case in France or continental Europe. You didn't want to tear down the existing structures. You wanted a place in them. So radicalism in England was a campaign for parliamentary representation. You didn't want to destroy Parliament, you wanted a place in it. And I think that what's happened with the referendum is the first time that Parliament has consciously and deliberately, and led by its Speaker and by its leading MPs, consciously reversed the notion of representation. And it seems to me to be an act of unprecedented folly. And you look at some of those involved, they're supposedly quite serious people. I don't think Burkers. I used to think Dominic Grieve was. But it's a sort of act of institutional suicide.